Right now on GBH News Rooted, we're honoring one of our own, a voice that has shaped the very fabric of investigative journalism across the globe. Phillip Martin, senior investigative reporter for GBH News, is retiring after a remarkable career spanning decades, from uncovering labor and sex trafficking in our own backyard to reporting on global injustices. Phillip has never shied away from the hard truths. He is a multi-award-winning journalist, a mentor to me and so many others, a trailblazer, and in 2024, he was inducted into the Massachusetts Broadcast Hall of Fame. We reflect on his journey, his impact, and what comes next. Hey, Phillip, thanks so much for being here. At
Thank you, Paris.
I know you haven't been here since we got a little. Well, you have been here, but we got a little makeover.
That's right. And what a makeover, you know. And you're doing a great job as host.
Well, thank you.
Just an amazing job.
Thank you. I have you and Callie and so many others to thank for making that possible. So, Phillip, let's talk about you. Let's start at the very beginning of your journey. What first drew you to journalism, and did you ever imagine that your career would end up where it is today?
I didn't, because I thought I was going to be in theater. And my mom wanted me to be a preacher, but the preacher part wasn't going to work because it wasn't concomitant with my religion, and my religion was whatever, you know. And so, you know, you really have to be amen, exactly. And so growing up in Detroit, when you look around your neighborhood and you see your neighborhood portrayed in ways that are consistently negative, you want to do something about it. Mm-hmm. You can become a lawyer, a doctor, a fireman, something to improve the neighborhood. I thought the best way that I could improve the image of my neighborhood was by portraying it accurately, not the disinformation and misinformation that characterized the coverage of Black communities when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. And even then, it was at that time that I thought journalism might be a way of basically redrawing and creating a more accurate portrayal picture, rather than a stick figure image of where I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. And you have set out to do that across many different subject matters, including labor and sex trafficking, as well as domestic terrorism, all things that we face pretty presently, right? And pretty much in our face. And so what moment from your career has really, I know there's so many, but when you think about what you've covered, what really sticks with you the most?
I think there are a lot of things. There are both topics and there are events, there are circumstances, happenings, if you will, and cases that I think about. The coverage of police violence, the Dan Roy Henry case, DJ Henry, the family out of Easton, whose son was killed outside of New York City. That's a story that sticks with me. The coverage of the Whitey Bulger trial is something that sticks with me. The coverage of sex trafficking starting in 2010, the focus there. But I'd actually started years earlier when I worked for The World, covering, interviewing people on a beach in Recife, Brazil, who were exploiting young girls who had flown in from Germany and other places. The beach was euphemistically called Germantown in Recife, Brazil, and this was for The World. And I think about also coverage of labor trafficking. I think about the coverage of the Tsarnaev and the Boston Marathon case. These are things that stick with me. When you mentioned domestic terrorism, when I did a series looking at defining domestic terrorism and questioning the failure of the U.S. government and Congress and the presidents of various parties to push hard to make domestic violence that perpetuated by people like Dylan Roof, a racist out of South Carolina who killed, as you know, at AME Bethel. Was it AME? At the church in South Carolina, to make that, consider that as a domestic act of terrorism. And even now, of course, it's become a lot worse in terms of encouraging that type of mentality in the States, and that is the type of coverage I focused on.
And does it make it harder for you to put the pen down, so to speak? I mean, given where we are as a nation today.
Without question, and for that reason I won't be. I will be leaving GBH, yes, I will be retiring, but I have other projects that I'm thinking of that will address the issues that we have to address in terms of anti-democratic norms that have seeped into American society, that challenge our Constitution, that challenge us as a multicultural, as a multiracial nation, and that are challenging history itself.
So I want to hear more about
Sure.
those projects to the extent that you can tell us about them, Phillip. But everything that you described, and as I mentioned earlier, these are hard truths, hard stories to tell. Did you ever face pushback over your career for taking maybe the road less traveled and telling these harder stories? And how did you respond to that?
Oh, but you asked the question. Yes, there have been many episodes, even covering human trafficking. When I first proposed that at GBH, surprisingly, because of the way I think about these stories, that you cannot think about it in a vacuum. It's not just local. That if you're covering this issue, it expands nationally, and it is international. And so the notion of covering, being a local news organization and looking at this nationally and internationally was not something that folks bought into immediately. I pushed hard to make that happen with help from International Center for Journalists and groups like the Pulitzer Center. Trying to cover caste in America was not something, it was something I was allowed to do. And thanks to the space allocated by GBH. But there was tremendous pushback against covering caste. But that's something that we did in a series called Caste in America. Even talking about police violence in the early part of my career at GBH was something that was framed quite differently. And the same was true for at National Public Radio. My career there as NPR's first race relations correspondent. There were times when issues were not focused on in ways that I had hoped. I covered the International Conference on Race in South Africa. And at that time, it was the first time I had run into people who were talking about caste as an issue that should be talked about globally. And pushing that to NPR was not something that was immediately accepted.
What were the fears that were associated when you would hear?
It was new. It was novel. It wasn't considered part of the norm. It was outside of the standard framework of assumption. And anything outside the standard framework of assumption, as you correctly infer, is oftentimes seen suspiciously or not newsworthy, or perhaps not acceptable, and perhaps people would not get it. It was assumed. And when it was finally suggested that I work on this story, it was going to air on September 11th. 2001.
Boy.
I was in South Africa right before the September 11th, 2001 returned. I was stuck in Italy at that point after leaving South Africa. And then 2 weeks later, I was covering Shanksville, the aftermath of the destruction there and the terrorist act there where the Flight 93 crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Wow. So did that original story ever air?
The original story never aired. It was lost in time and lost to tragedy.
Yeah. As so many were at that time.
As many were, indeed.
The 9/11 attacks really reshaped this entire country.
That's right.
But Phillip, you did mention that you were NPR's first race relations correspondent. And as you said, that was a barrier-breaking role. Today, we're living in a time where the focus on DEI is receding because of the current times that we're living in. But I think there's always been this question of did we need diversity-focused reporters in newsrooms when really it should have been part of everyone's beat. How do you look at that now? Do you think that the role that you were in at that time at NPR is something that would be needed today?
I can't think of a better Exhibit A than myself for the need for diversity in reporting. There are many stories that would not have gotten on the air if I and other people, many other people, had not pushed for that type of coverage because of the very point I'm making. This framework of assumption, often what is considered normal, what is considered acceptable, is often determined culturally and racially by people's experience. and by and how we see history. I can't imagine doing a story, and can't imagine anyone going into journalism without having a great background in history. We see now history being challenged, history being turned on its head. It's not a question just of DEI. It's a question of how do we basically see a multiracial, multi-ethnic society that until recently, in relative terms, has become a multi-ethnic, multicultural democracy. And again, that's marked by the civil rights movement and movements that preceded it. But we had basically had a country that was divided by Jim Crow and other racial systems of governance that also that also shaped our history, shaped how we moved about in society, shaped where we lived, where we banked, who we loved, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And reporters like myself, in entering the field in the 70s and 80s and so on and so forth, you helped to give a different perspective on America and on the world, indeed, not just the United States, but on the world. Mm-hmm. That shows the urgency, the exigency of coverage by reporters of color, journalists of color, editors, managing editors, newspaper owners, reporters. The need for that could not be more clear than it is now during this period of authoritarianism that we're dealing with in the country, where there's an attempt to rewrite history, indeed to whitewash history.
Do you think that in this day and age it is harder to do investigative journalism because of all you mentioned?
I think it really depends on where you are. There are some places where investigative journalism will become a lot harder. 60 Minutes, for example, with the acquisition of CBS by an organization that has already worked in cooperation with the former owner of CBS and Paramount to essentially obfuscate facts, history, and a story that occurred. That story was a story that led to 60 Minutes agreeing to a $16 million settlement with the Trump administration. Was not a story that should have ever been. It should never have been a situation where $16 million should have been given to someone to basically as recompense.
Let alone the U.S. government.
Well, let alone the U.S. government. Well, in this case, it was actually given to for the Trump Library. So it's and I think that. So it really depends on where you are. I think at GBH, or GBH as we've been rebranded, there will always be, I think, investigative journalism, and investigative journalism with an edge that's important. I think you see organizations like Reveal and Mother Jones. You see the New Republic, Atlantic, New York Times. But they also need, at those organizations, they need people of color to make sure that they probe deeper and deeper and as deeply as they can outside of that framework.
We talked a little bit about the importance of investigative journalism in this day and age, but what to you, as someone who has won Murrow Awards, NABJ Awards, Peabody recognition, et cetera, what makes great investigative journalism?
Well, curiosity, of course, is one, but also I think passion and empathy. There was a journalism model years ago where you're supposed to be non-empathetic, sort of stoic in terms of your approach to life and issues and people. But that makes no sense. I think what makes a good investigative journalist, are people, is the trait that we all should have, which is empathy, compassion, looking into a matter because we're concerned about it, looking into abuse because we're concerned about it, looking into injustice because we see it as injustice. And that becomes the main motivating factor that spurs good investigative journalists, is that you have to have a stake in it as a human being. It cannot be divorced from that from that, your compassion cannot be divorced from the work that you do. Though you can do that work in a way that allows you to focus and not to be distracted, but you basically have to be motivated by something other than awards or accolades.
Now, one place that you have been able to communicate this passion that you have for your work is in the various documentaries you've been featured in, including Trial 4 and Manhunt on Netflix, as well as GBH's Unseen. So what's it been like for your work to have that impact, to be shared beyond just the journalistic audience, but almost in this sort of entertainment, true crime way?
That is such a great question. It's important that we share our expertise, and it's important that we share our journalistic knowledge and ways of probing into issues in as many forms as possible. You've done that, Paris. It's as many forms as possible. It's absolutely.
Sometimes it's just a TikTok.
No. It's absolutely essential. As you mentioned, for example, what was important for me was something we just completed, something called the digital tsunami. When I say we, I'm working with a group of Canadian producers to produce a new documentary about AI and its ill effects. And how and digital communications and its ill effects. Among the interviews we did in this documentary was talking to a black man who was misidentified, spent time in jail because of facial recognition gone wrong. We spoke to the widow of Jamal Khashoggi in Washington, D.C. Her phone had been infected with Pegasus software. And we show how that basically led to the Saudi government tracking him down and killing him. And so sharing is absolutely important. And GBH, to its credit, they encourage that you share that knowledge in as many forms as possible. And among my favorite, of course, besides Manhunt and Trial 4, working with the producers who focus on the man Sean Ellis, who was wrongly accused and wrongly spent time in prison, was also talking about, sharing with the nation what's happening in in our own state with a radical right-wing group, NSC 131, which I talked about on the Rachel Maddow show with Rachel Maddow.
Which was a big deal. I remember that very vivid.
Yeah, that was a very important interview for me because it was a way of talking about what is happening here and sort of precursor to what we're experiencing now in terms of right-wing organizations feeling they've been given a green light, far-right groups, to go further and to normalize extreme right-wing white supremacist concepts, which is what we're seeing now with our own government.
So, Phillip, you mentioned, we talked about earlier, the things that you have loaded up for your retirement. You're retiring from GBH News, but not from the craft.
That's
what
right.
Can we expect in this next chapter for you?
Well, taking off from what I just mentioned a second ago, I'm hoping to look a lot deeper into people who are pushing back. Looking at people around the country who are trying to hold on to democracy, and and they're brave in doing so. To hold on to democracy doesn't mean simply holding a picket sign, or it doesn't mean filing just a lawsuit, or even writing an article, or it means any number of things. It could be that World War II vet who is still pushing back against fascism many years after World War II. And these folks are dying off quickly. It could mean that person who is teaching in classes against all odds, being told that you cannot teach Black history and teaching Black history because that person knows Black history is American history. So I will be looking at a project where looking at people around the country, ordinary people who are pushing back, trying to save what's left of our democracy.
So I'm going to ask one more question. I know this is going to make our production team mad, but I had to do it because we have this lovely photo of you, Phillip.
Ouch.
And very quickly, if you could say one message to this 30-year-old Phillip Martin, what would you say?
Oh, one message would be continue to focus on the things that you need to explain to the world, to the country, to the American people, and to folks who would benefit from your young knowledge.
Well, that is GBH's Phillip Martin. Thank you so very much for your courage, your clarity, and your commitment to truth.
Thank you, Paris.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
And as you step into this next chapter, we know that your legacy will continue to inspire journalists like me and beyond. So thank you.